Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I am Rishabh Gulati. Very good morning to you. And here we are, yet another budget morning. Once upon a time, one of the biggest exercises, not only of the physical aspects of India's progress, but in many terms, a linchpin of how our policy framework was going to shape up for the next financial year. Not so much anymore. Because through the course of the year, all the ministries, all the departments continue rolling out the policies. We get a fair perspective on a real-time basis of where the country is growing, including major projects and inaugurals. But one major event that took place a few years ago has also made this exercise limited as far as you and I are concerned to what happens with direct taxes. And that, of course, was GST, which now happens under a separate GST Council, which of course keeps meeting, and then we keep having conversations on how to tax popcorn. Now, in the larger scheme of things, a budgetary exercise is going to tell you the health and the state of the country's finances and what the thematic priorities of governance are. There is a limit to which a government and a finance minister have flexibility, because the salaries have to be paid, the projects that have already been announced in the years past have to be completed and allocated. There can be an up and down, and the larger scheme of infrastructure, on defense, on the import of oil, in meeting our debt requirements, in meeting our interest payments, those are pretty much all static figures. But amongst the 30-40 lakh crores that are to be allocated over the course of the next couple of hours, what are the themes? And for many people watching the broadcast, there is a self-interest in this. And what is the self-interest? The self-interest is that the nation's progress has to be held on the shoulders of the people who pay taxes. The people who earn salaries first pay the tax. Then every time you go and purchase something, you pay more tax. Oftentimes we find in the history and progress of nations that the people who are the richest and own companies, they own nothing to their name. They have neither house nor car, because everything is being put on a balance sheet somewhere and depreciation is being written off. So what happens to the people, the ordinary Joe who's earning a living, middle class time? I think an idea certainly whose time has come. So we had a tax rejig last year. What's going to happen this time around? Let's open up this conversation. Joining us on the broadcast, we have the former Union Commerce Secretary, Dr. Ajay Dua is with us. Sumit Peer is joining us. Vishwanathan Iyer is joining us this morning. And General Dwivedi is joining us this morning as well. Ajay Dua, let me start with you, sir. So, there's X that can be done now in a budget. It's not what it used to be 20, 30 years ago. But for a lot of people, okay, including you and me, it becomes a solitary item. What happens to income taxes? Because, all the other taxes are anyway out of the budget framework. What's your gut feeling today, sir?
I think the budget will be in response to what we have seen in the economy in the first half of the last year. The budget can't possibly ignore that, though the economic survey, and as you know, Rishabh, we've seen one of the longest economic surveys of 480 pages released yesterday. Very comprehensive, though, yet I would say. It recognizes the fact that in the first half of last year, we had, due to very valid concerns, geopolitical situations, the global uncertainty, plus the capital investment both by the government as well as the private sector slowing down. What has been said all along, the economic survey captures that. So I expect some of the issues which have been raised as the causes, what was, as I said, what was earlier being mentioned, but now recognized by the government through this official document, and no longer is the government trying to say that it is a blip which will automatically disappear, as was tried to explain. So I expect government to be very responsive. And two things, if I might say, before I give the floor to the others. One, the government will be addressing the concerns of the lower middle class, which is the largest category in India, which means salaried, which come within the 2.5 crore people who pay the taxes or who are in the tax fold, and that's the meager number. Less than 2% of the entire 140 billion people in India pay the taxes. Their concerns I am expecting to be addressed, and the address is going to be how to put more purchasing power in their hands so that the aggregate demand increases, and that excuse of overcapacity in the economy, which the private sector has been feeling or talking about, that will get met to some extent when there is greater demand. Number
Okay.
one. Number two, I expect that the government, while continuing with most of the schemes which they have launched in the past and all have to be given time to prove their worth, the government is going to be also looking at the rural sector, particularly agriculture, because that's being realized increasingly that its share must go beyond 15 to 16% if 45% of the population of the country continues to be in rural areas and highly dependent upon agriculture.
Okay, so let's pick this up. For perspective, ladies and gentlemen, when the first union budget was put together, we're talking about 1947-48. The government expenditure was 197 crore rupees. Nirmala Sitharaman will sit today and probably announce an expenditure of about 50 lakh crore rupees. Now, let me get Sumit Peer on this. Sumit, it is now a truism to say that we are stuck in an odd scenario, that there are whole swaths of the Indian public that do not pay direct taxes. Agricultural income is exempt from all direct taxes. Now, that's fine, but the problem happens when there are pretty well-to-do, pretty wealthy people who will find through some pretext not to pay tax. Now, those can be a set of people who, let's face it, are flying around in private jets, but they own nothing. Everything's on the company balance sheet, and the company writes off all expenditure. So you have a private jet, even the jet fuel is expenditure. Everything that you're writing off in terms of percentage of depreciation every year. And we find that the amount of taxes paid is pretty little. Then we find, of course, the rest of us who have to first earn a salary. So now we've done the mathematics. If you earn 100 rupees and then you pay 20-30% tax on it, then every time you go purchase something and you pay another 18% tax on it, think of what you end up actually having from your hard work. Sumit Peer, this is a going frustration. It's got nothing to do with this government, previous government. It's an ongoing frustration. But is it being realized in the halls of government?
Rishabh ji, good morning to you and all the fellow panelists and all the viewers. Pleasure always to be on the special broadcast like this. Well, I want to put a few things in perspective, sir. The first and the most important thing is, if you look at the receivable side of the government of India last budget, right? The number one contributor is income tax, though we might argue only 2 crore people pay income tax, but that is the biggest where the money of the government comes from, followed by GST, followed by corporate tax. So only so-called 2 crore people paying income tax in India is more than the corporate tax and GST collected. That's also a reality. So, and out of that, the salaried class is the person, or the middle class is the person who gets squeezed most. Now the challenge is also the same, is like you have 42 crore people which are in middle class today. It is supposed to go to 60 crore. It is almost 31% of the people who are typically going to vote because they are all adults and earning. It's a big electoral mass which you have to capture, and this class believes in when things are done for them, not promised for them. So what I expect, looking at all those things and looking at their aspirations, first, agriculture has to be brought up, what Dua Sahab rightly said, there's no doubt about it. Second thing is that, up to 10 or 12 lakhs, we expect that, they should be given some respite, they should be given some kind of a thing. I am hoping that the old tax structure, which had this lot of jugards, I would call them now today, ye bill dalo, wo bill dalo, that will be given off. Because Modi ji has promised less tax. For less tax, you need very simplified tax structure. You can't have those 50 exemptions and all. So I think the old tax regime will go. Even when there's a new tax regime which is being talked about, then only you will be able to give some standard deductions. And the thing is, Rishabh ji, people in this country always crib about GST. I have a suggestion to make about the GST. Look, with GST, now you have AI, you have software, so a lot of technologies which are available there. You can introduce a collateral free lending based on your GST collected or paid. So it's like a salaried person can, like you and me or somebody can get, credit cards for 20, 30, 40 lakhs if you have that kind of a salary. But for a business owner, if you can use the GST paid as a way to calculate how much of collateral free lending can we do to them. But for
Okay.
this, for MSMEs and SMEs can be a big revolution. So with these things, you have to manage your fiscal deficit. You have to look at the budget. You have to put money, with Rishabh on the defense now, because you look at the hostilities increasing around us. You look at the challenges increasing around
Yes.
us. So it's not easy.
So I'm going to pick on that, but the biggest, of course, challenge is everything is fine if the country is growing at a healthy pace. And as Ajay Dua mentioned, we have to be slightly cautious of that because we've had an economic survey yesterday, and the economic survey is telling you things are relativistically growing great. So as you compare it to the rest of the world, we are going to be pretty much the fastest growing major economy. But that is not good enough. We have to be nearer the 10% mark, not nearer the 5% mark. And that has to be a long-term trend. But we are putting perspective. So let me get perspective in. General Dwivedi, before I get into defense expenditure and all the other matters with you, just as a human being, as a person who's earned a salary, earns a pension, here's a reality check, right? 50 lakh crores is what Nirmala Sitharaman has got to play with, of which around about 20 lakh crores come from direct taxes, of which 50%, so 10 lakh crores come from individual taxpayers, the balance 10 come from corporates. So 25% of the union budgetary expenditure is paid for by less than 2% of the people. General Dwivedi, now that's a duty that people are fulfilling, but after a point, what can be done to look after these people?
Well, Rishabh, I think some of the issues have been covered by the previous panelists. There is actually what we can see is a lopsided tax collection because 2% of the people are paying taxes and the larger portion of the people are not paying taxes. So this is one aberration that needs to be corrected. Just as a case in point, people like me who are in the gig fraternity, when we go for even taking a class or a lecture, we are supposed to pay even 10% of GST on those kind of issues. So therefore, the point is that I think this aberration needs to be corrected. We need to widen the tax net, especially because I would say that like agriculture, there are big farmers who are owning hundreds of acres of land, and they are also being given free electricity, all subsidies. I think this needs a serious look because you can't keep squeezing only 2%. And unfortunately, they say good economics doesn't make good politics. Now here comes the politics because vote bank politics is one of the issues. Why they don't want to touch certain segment of people.
No, but General Dwivedi, I know some of those farmers who drive a Mercedes and then pay no taxes, but is the middle class not a vote bank for anyone? That does nobody actually genuinely care?
Actually, middle class, is the one which gets squeezed maximum. It is like an orphan class because unfortunately, in middle class is not the class which actually impacts the voting or the election outcome. Now that is where the whole situation lies. So once we are able to juggle, this tax base, and until we don't widen it, you see, there is middle class and the 2% of those people who are paying taxes are going to squeeze. I have one point. See, when we are paying taxes, we should also get incentives. But there's no incentive. If I am paying a tax, there should be certain amount of incentive should be there. Like Sumit, we had also touched upon the GST dimension. I think all those who are paying taxes must have some incentives. Whether these incentives are direct or indirect, but until you incentivize people to pay taxes, this aberration is not going to be corrected, Rishabh.
Okay, so how do you incentivize people? You incentivize people to pay taxes by having lower taxes. And that's the lesson we've learned from the 70s in India, where you could pay income tax up to 70%, 80%, 90%, and therefore people did not pay taxes. That's a bit different now. So again, I'm trying to put perspective to this. We look at about 8 crore income tax returns that are filed every year. That's imagine accounting for about 6% of India's population. So of that, less than half actually pay taxes. Now that's because the tax slabs have genuinely incrementally gone up. So people are filing income tax return, but their next net tax receipts are nil. The system of paying taxes has become a lot easier, direct taxes. When I filed my tax returns this year, I got my refund within 15 minutes. I couldn't understand what happened. It was a very small amount of a refund, but tax return filed, stepped out, got a message, your tax refund has been credited. So the system of paying taxes has become a lot easier. But Alok Mehta, the genuine grouse and frustration remains. And the frustration is on this point that less than 2% of the people, and that's all of us, are paying for 1/4 of what Nirmala Sitharaman is hoping to earn this year.
Very good morning, Rishabh. I think this is the main problem about even the woman. You see, in the middle class, the woman, if you get some fixed deposits, because when you are getting some salary or salary of the family, and if you have some fixed deposit for the future, especially for the elder people, I would like to mention the number of women, they always cry for this, that again they have to pay on their fixed deposits. You see this kind of tragedy. First you pay from salary, when you deposit something and then you get some interest is going down. And agriculture land, you are talking about only the farmers, big farmers. We are talking since last 50 years about this. But now you see the farmers who are also farmers. You know, number of, with all regards, because there are our guests also sometimes, the legal experts and even the medical practitioners. I visited number of people and I know the friends also in a legal circle who just say, okay, this is my agriculture income. They get, and still you go to doctors, physicians, normal doctors in the middle class or the poor people, they ask money by cash, even in our digital revolution. If you are ill and you are going to doctor and they say, okay, you have to pay 500 rupees or 200 rupees, you have to pay. These kind of people, they are also not paying tax. This is the tragedy, because the system, when you have digital revolution, at least for the agriculture also, if you have earning more than 50 lakhs, at least they should have tax, or even 1 crore. You see, I know people who will not pay single pie and they have big lands, including few top editors of India I know who are now retired. But they have their own company and they are earning also by land, farming. And they say, okay, we have the agricultural income. These guys, that's why I'm saying it's a self-criticism should be there. And I think the Nirmala Sitharaman ji is from an academic background. She also must be knowing JNU, pension, almost the whole budget goes to the pension people. And then what happened? For the education, we are suffering. You know, sorry to say, it's just a diversion, but the Trump is saying, okay, we all to close the education ministry. Here we have to spend more money for the education, for the large new education policy or health policies. Everybody expect, okay, we will want insurance for 15 lakhs or rebate in good free hospitals. What kind of hospitals you will provide when you are not paying tax to those people? And the people who have a trust, on the name of the trust, they have a hospitals and they get free, everything free for their own people, for their family members, get machines from out of the country and then say, oh, they are not paying tax. These kind of loopholes are there. But because of the system, sorry to say again, not everybody, there are a number of good, very good officials, honest officers, but the bureaucracy also dominate in this system, and the politicians who also have the
but Alokji, the loopholes, but the loopholes can only be exploited by the very rich who have the teams of people who exploit the loopholes. And the reality of this is, and let me get Mr. Iyer into this conversation. Mr. Iyer, this is not true only of India, it's true of it's true of America, because the biggest corporates will be headquartered in the Bahamas and they will be paying license fees for their brand name to their own entity in the Bahamas and saying that, oh, because the license fee is $20 billion and that's an expenditure, so we actually run a loss. You know what to do, we are such bichara, such poor people, you know, don't mind my private jet. So, very rich people get away with it. The poor, of course, can't afford to pay the tax. So, what about the rest of us?
So, good morning, Rishabhji, and namaskar to all my fellow panelists. So, the issue of expanding the taxpayer base has very well been talked about by other fellow panelists here, right? So, that's an unavoidable issue. The larger question is, what can we do about it? I mean, we have certain realities.
Yeah.
So probably let me wear my CA hat instead of my, as a professor, as a doctorate. My thinking as a basic CA is, when I look at United States, Singapore, and other countries, the filing of returns can be as an individual, as a family, with children, parents. So when we allow that kind of a system in India, that would automatically factor in the number of dependent members, the number of earning members, taking family as a unit. Perhaps that's the one way where it is possible for government to bring in a kind of relief for people. See, on one hand, we need to expand the tax base, agriculturists and others who don't deserve to get that kind of exemption. So that's a point taken, right? So here I'm talking of what else can be done from the other side, so that there is some kind of relief that can be extended to people. And perhaps one more thing, talking from a corporate or as an individual, high net worth individual point of view, more than the tax, people get irritated by litigations. So we also need to look at, as a government, as a ministry, also need to look at how do you make the entire environment litigation free, the entire environment more certain in terms of exactly what to pay. You don't have to play around with the numbers, right? So that's what would make this entire experience, paying money will never be pleasant, but at least it will make the entire experience comfortable for taxpayers.
Okay, so let me pick up that thought, right? Because when you say litigation is when the officer in government then says, okay, what have you spent here? But yes, we have a shopkeeper who suddenly says, I'm buying 10 MacBooks, which are actually being done to get GST benefits. So, the government also has to do its duty, because it's not fair if I'm an honest taxpayer and the guy next door is doing all sorts of hera-feri. So, government has to do it. But Mr. Iyer, has the fact of at least the ease of filing taxes made it a lot easier? That, okay, at least you don't have to go to that income tax office where there will be a clerical level person who, may want whatever just to process your file or accept your file in time. All of that has been out of the window. So has that made it easier to a new generation of people who will never have to visit an income tax office? It's all online.
Absolutely. And I must also say, 25 years ago, I started my career as a chartered accountant. I must say that, the corruption and all those things that we see at the grassroots level of dealing with the officials, various officials, not just tax, excise, all kinds of officials, those things are mostly a thing of past. So we have come a long way over the last 20 years, and particularly the last few years, given the digital push, we have come a long way. That's why I'm saying the base is set. There are some two big irritants on the way. And like my other senior fellow panelists have rightly identified, if we can expand the base, not club everybody as agriculturists and expand the base so that more people pay tax. And second, for individual taxpayers, bring in family as a unit and other changes that we bring in. That would bring in a lot of relief for genuine people who want to pay tax and contribute to, towards the mission of Viksit Bharat. Who doesn't want, as an Indian, who doesn't want to see our country as, the developed country by 2047? We all want to see that.
I can think of a very rich list of people who are more than happy to offshore their assets, but also then complain about the state of the roads. So yes, it's a truism that we all want to contribute, but I can think of a lot of country who are blessed, people who are blessed, sometimes feel that, listen, somebody else can contribute on my behalf. But let me take a practical aspect of this. Ajay Dua, it's, what the lesson we've learned is that at best we can hope at incrementality, that okay, a little bit, and we keep chipping away, we keep improving it year on year. Can we look at something that is actually a leap of state going from one orbit to the other?
Certainly. I don't think we need to be worried totally by the past, or saying that we had said something, we have to only benefit from the delta, the additionality which comes about. All the major improvements in the country's economy, we are now able to have two clear phases, prior to 91 and post 91. To have the benefits when you thought big in 91, 92, when you integrated into the world, when you de-licensed, make globalization and liberalization the two went together. And you have data. Earlier you had the Hindu rate of growth, about 3%, because it was matching your population, and the post that you had twice that rate. Average, irrespective of which government has come into power, you had a plus 5% rate of growth in GDP on a higher base. So if that is possible, I see no reason why in our tax collection, our expenditure exercise, which is by and large the budgeting. That's all the budget looks at, the revenue and the expenditure and putting the priorities together. I think if we start thinking big and say, I'm going to look at this entire exercise ab initio, and to that I get encouraged by, go back to the economic survey where the chief economic advisor has talked of deregulation. It's first time a theme has been picked up where the government's nominee or the government's representative, senior representative, is clearly recognizing the advantages of deregulating the economy. That means do away with the past shackles and think big. I am optimistic about that it is possible to do so.
Okay, let me get Sumit in. Sumit, let's pick up the next big issue, right? So, all right, we